familiar one, Luke 15, the prodigal son. Any prodigal sons or prodigal daughters here? Hooray for that! I think you ought to go out and get a few prodigal sons and daughters, please. You're all very good people. Can't call you sinners if you're not prodigals. We've heard this story many times. We've heard it from the son's perspective, from the son who stayed at home perspective, from the father's perspective, heard it from maybe God's perspective. I invite you to listen to it differently today. Not because it's any different in the story, but different in the way that, what does Jesus say? Because this is a parable. It's not a true life story, it's a parable. It's a parable set deeply in Hebrew mythology. It's not even a Christian story, not even a Christian parable. It's about a Hebrew family, a Hebrew community. Listen deeply to what Jesus is trying to say, portray, remembering that Jesus is a radical.
So the reading this morning, Luke 15, 1 to 3, and then 11 to 32, from the New International Version. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am, starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come home,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all those years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" My child, God answered, why does the moon return to the dark sky night after night? Gravity, I responded, assuming I knew everything. Then God laughed the most musical laugh and scooped me up in God's hands like a tiny bird in a safe nest. God said, you're right. The moon is tethered to the earth with a pull too strong for you to imagine. And in the same way, I am tethered to you. I cannot go. I cannot forget you. I won't. You are my heart, which means night after night I will return to your dark skies to add light. That's why you came back, I whispered. To help me. Yes, Scott nodded. To help you, but also to love you. And with that, we sat together all night long and watched the moon grow bigger and brighter, while the stars danced in its glow. For stars know what new life looks like. It is light in the darkness, again and again, night after night.
I wonder what conversations you've had this week. I wonder if I can turn that off a little bit more. I wonder what conversations you've had this week. Is that okay for everyone? I've had a few conversations. I wonder if they're like yours. Maybe. Mine are sort of farming type people. And there are a lot of them are anti-vaxxers for all sorts of reasons as well. But there are three conversations that stuck out for me over the last little while. Two of them were to do with estranged children that they hadn't seen for several years. Deep sadness in that. A bit like prodigal sons, I guess, in some way. One of the children was described as being finding herself. She had been adopted when she was just 3 years of age. She was out there finding herself, but not able to come to what had become home. The other conversation, I can't remember how it came out, but it attracted a couple of other people to come and listen in. And this was people who were regular church attenders and some not so regular, but they had a sort of a biblical, spiritual appreciation. And it came about a person's sadness who belonged to the church for the Jews. I said, why is that? He said, well, they haven't recognised Jesus as Lord and Saviour. And I said, does that matter? I tried to say it in a way that I wasn't leading him down a track that he knew he didn't want to go down. I wanted a conversation. And that attracted a couple of other people, and I said, does it really matter? Do you think God minds? And there was this stuttering and stammering that you get when people want to just say, well, actually only God knows. Yes, only God knows, but we make a judgment, don't we? Our theology, our church, our understanding. But does it really matter? What matters in the end? The Jews loved God. Greg and I sometimes, I don't know if they're coinciding at the same time, we watch the Central Synagogue, or tune into the Central Synagogue in New York. And could be any sort of worship that any of us could easily just go in and sit and enjoy. It's a worship of God. It's a conversation with God, with those scriptures that we call the Old Testament, they call the Hebrew Scriptures. So, in that conversation, they came back to me and said, well, what do you think, Colin? It doesn't matter. And I said, no, to me it doesn't matter. If we believe that God loves all people unconditionally, grace abounds, forgiveness is for all at all times. How do we argue with that? We can't, I guess. I'm not really that caring for when people say only God knows, because in the heart of their hearts, as they know also, they want to place a judgment on what they think God already knows. But Jesus also engaged in that regular challenge, didn't he? We know that Jesus challenged the status quo, always, forever getting himself into trouble. He had a blatant disregard for those religious laws. And he often called the law keepers, what do you call them? Hypocrites. He and his followers often in conflict with those Pharisees and those Sadducees and those people who kept the law, those ones who were law enforcers. Things like healing on the Sabbath. And I'd ask you these questions, but you're masked up and I didn't know who to go and put the microphone in front of. But we know that Jesus got in trouble for healing on the Sabbath, for eating, or because he was eating meant he had to work, so he was working on the Sabbath. You see a lot around about the Sabbath. And he adds in that reading there from the prodigal son, there's a couple of words that picked up on there as I heard David read it yet again. One was the religious elite, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they muttered because he kept the company of sinners. He muttered because he kept the company of sinners. Sinners seen as people with leprosy, the Samaritans. I never quite understand why tax collectors are sinners. I can understand the acts towards them, but they classify them in amongst. I'm not quite sure. I haven't really looked that up. But the biggest thing he got himself into, well, one of the things he got himself in was hypocrites. Why? Why was he always doing this? Now we know that Jesus was always confronting the injustices around him. But today's parable, I wonder what it's challenging. I wonder what you thought Jesus was challenging in today's parable. What rules was Jesus trying to break? What was he trying to break down? Who was he trying to bring into the circle? What was he saying, trying to say about the divine? How was that parable about including people? How was it challenging the prevalent picture, attitude, thoughts about God? This icon here, and you'll see Trinity on there, so I haven't been able to purchase it, so you might want to be careful when you put it online. This picture, for quite a number of years, some of you know my attitude toward the good Jesus, the good shepherd with the cuddly little sheep, and the nice little Anglo-Saxon Jesus sitting down with the cuddly little sheep. You know my attitude towards that. A certain website would have been. And Jesus was never a shepherd. We have to think about that too. Jesus was never a shepherd. I've got a few builders in my family, and they're scared of sheep, little cuddly sheep. They just won't go near them. In fact, we had a 750 kilogram cow that was pregnant to move yesterday, and the builders went like that. And I was left in the middle. And I just lifted up the bucket and she followed me down the road. So it's all right. They didn't know that secret. So, anyway, if I could get rid of the cross, I would. And what would I put there? I would put Jesus the shepherd. Not because Jesus is a Bedouin shepherd. It's a wonderful imagery, wonderful depth of understanding from the Hebrew people about the good shepherd. The shepherd that leads and guides and nurtures and cares and looks for the lost, brings them in and looks after them. Will leave the 99 saved, to go off and find. That was the other word that came out in that reading, even though I've read it, is that the older brother said, you won't even sacrifice a goat. I always thought it was a lamb. A kid. A goat. And I love goats. Out of all the animals we had on the farm, I had a pet goat, and I enjoyed goats. And that we had to get rid of it eventually after about 8 years because Dad got sick of it ring barking all the trees because I didn't quite keep it in its cage on its tether. The painter of this piece of artwork is Robert Ince. Robert Rintz, and he's a Franciscan friar, and he painted this in 1990. What happened in 1990? Gulf War. He painted it out of a great sense of hatred toward, not his hatred, but the nation, America in particular, and the world maybe in general, hatred toward Muslims, or their understanding of where Muslims might sit in the theological spectrum that they've become accustomed to. What is it about a billy goat? How do they smell? Musky, they say. And you'll notice that the billy goat has got a hand clasped around it, because goats you can't contain. And you'll notice that it's got big horns. It's a Bedouin shepherd. And what Robert was trying to say and portray there is that, well, what do you think he was trying to say, trying to portray? Maybe the inclusive nature, God's compassion. Unlike cuddly lambs, the goat is ready to jump, ready to do something risky, ready to do something different. And the Bedouin is not a well-dressed, well-groomed European man. He's Middle Eastern, burnt by the desert sun. And you notice the inscription on the side in I want to say Arab. Arab. The inscription is from Matthew 9:13. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I forgot to introduce this by saying I've got 2 video clips to follow up. One I was going to put in front of younger generations in our household. One in particular is they're getting married, and I've got to find somebody to do some premarital thing they want me to officiate. But the video clip I wanted them to review and see what it says to them. I didn't get a chance because they were too busy out doing what young people do. And the other one is just a bit of music for us to sit and reflect and listen to. So I'm not going to speak much further about this particular icon, and about the parable of the prodigal son, and about God's inclusive love that goes out to all people, no matter who, no matter what. And I have the courage enough to say that God's love is not just exclusively found through Jesus and the crucifixion story that we as Christians hold on to. And we're allowed to hold on to that as our expression, as Muslims are allowed to hold on to their understanding of love and compassion that God has, as do other religions as well. So what would be my message to the folk that I have lunch with and talk with across the fence in terms of our God's expansive love? One of the things I know is that they can't argue, not against Colin, but against the message that comes time and time again through our Christian scriptures, that God's love is beyond all measure and beyond all human understanding. And we need to relax and enjoy and be part of that enjoyment with everybody, to celebrate and to say, on the left they say, hurrah, and on the right they say, hurrah. Oh, not very enthusiastic. They were much better for you. I know this is not a competition between us three, but they were much better for you.
I don't give the same degree of choice.
Let's now look at, and it is about brokenness, it is about families, it's about coming together, it's about God's family, the big family, not the small family, the big family. So I invite you to sit back, listen to the words, watch what's going on in the video, and just be reminded that it's what's going to be used for younger people to understand relationships in particular.
For back to back, will my brokenness find you? Slide through the air and weigh you down too? If we stand eye to eye, will the truth ring true? Will you see me for me and I see you for you? 'Cause the pain in this world presses down like a cloak, a weight that I crumble under that threatens to choke out the fractures of life that give me hope until all I am is a set of broken bones. And these days, darkness covers my eyes until there seems to be nothing but absence of light, and it hangs in the air, this truth we don't say, that the world is hurting and we're all to blame. All to blame, all the same, all subject to hatred and judgment and rage. And I see it so clearly outside of me. Things I can point to, things I can grieve. And it looks like hunger and feels like depression, and it sounds like bombs and hurts like oppression, aggression, regression, lack of freedom for self-expression. And the shadows in me try to box it up clean, organize and label the broken things I see until they're so normalized they don't mean a thing, and I don't realize the brokenness in me. I don't realize it until I feel you breathe. Back to back, you try to sing, it must be the spirit. I sing the same thing, and our hearts for once are beating in sync. And somehow knowing you're standing there, breathing in that same sweet air, helps me to be more self-aware. And I feel a nagging in my bones to tell you I'm broken. I want you to know, because the brokenness I point to is also in me, and maybe I'm causing some of those broken things. It's a reality I avoid, but a truth that I need, because I don't want to be perfect, I just want to be seen. And if you know and I know that we both have flaws, then wouldn't it be easier to help each other walk? Wouldn't it be easier to have each other's back, to stop expecting perfection, to start to see the cracks as space for love and hope to grow, not as failure we aren't able to outgrow? So I'll start with confession and hope that you see me for me in our same basic need. I have broken bones, broken words, and broken hopes. I don't say what I mean, I pray the wrong thing. I have a broken heart and broken dreams on repeat. And I have more blind spots than I'm even aware, and a failure to see love when it's standing right there. I have hurt others and hurt myself more because for some reason I thought all was fair in love and war. And in that moment of confession, my world took a dive. 'Cause we're not back to back, we're standing eye to eye. And quietly you say, I carry it too. Brokenness, it's what we humans do. But I'll love you for you, 'cause I know the truth, you're just like me. Broken, but you. So here we stand on holy ground. 'Cause you gave me love I would have never found without you and confession and forgiveness and grace, and I am transformed in sacred ordinary space. For my brokenness found you, and yours found me right back. And now I know we're united and there's no going back. Your forgiveness reminds me of who I'm meant to be. Eye to eye, I finally see.